Hi, I'm Michael from Planet Naturopath. In this video, I'm going to show you the difference between the Dutch Plus and the Dutch Complete hormone tests from Precision Analytical. So on the left side of the page here, we've got the Dutch Plus. No, sorry, this is the Dutch Complete, and this is the Dutch Plus here. And as you'll see on the very first page, the different tests, different results, they're just samples. Everything's pretty much the same. They're both measuring testosterone, you've got the progesterone levels, the estradiol levels, you get total cortisol production, and then the main differences with the Dutch Plus, or the only difference is between the Dutch Plus and the Complete, is the Dutch Plus measures cortisol differently, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the adrenal page. But essentially, they measure the sex hormones exactly the same. On the second page of the test, you've got all the different sex hormones and just the facts and figures, and they're different colors, but essentially they're measuring the exact same markers. So you get total estrogen, total testosterone, you get 5-alpha DHT, and you get the metabolites of 5-alpha DHT. So you can see all the different and all the detox markers of the hormones. So you get the exact same information on both tests. On the second page, which is the page I like to use to help clients understand what the results mean, because it's the exact same information as the previous page, but it's easier to explain. So once again, they're exactly the same. You've got the 3 different types of estrogen. You've got the estrogen detox pathways, and you ideally want to be going down this green pathway, and you don't want high levels of the red and this one as well. The methylation of estrogen down here, and it's exactly the same behind my head over here. DHEA levels, and then you've got the testosterone and the metabolites of DHEA. So everything with the sex hormones between the Dutch Plus and the Dutch Complete is exactly the same. Now we move on to the adrenal part of the test, and this is where things are different. So they both measure creatinine levels, and this is just to make sure that someone's not dehydrated or overhydrated. That can change the results, and the results are adjusted for the hydration. And once again, this just gives us all the facts and figures, the cortisol, cortisone, and the difference with the Dutch Complete compared to the Dutch Plus is that they use saliva versus just urine. And they also use urine for total cortisol production. Maybe easier to explain on the next page. This is what I use with clients also. So the first thing I always look at is the total cortisol. So this person's actually producing a ton of cortisol, while this person's not. But the difference with the Plus and the Complete is the way they measure. With the saliva, you can get the exact cortisol levels at these exact moments. Whereas with the Dutch Complete, when you measure the cortisol when you wake up, that's actually measuring cortisol over the previous few hours. So if you get a higher reading here, this is still good information because it tells us that the cortisol during the night was too high. So you would expect that the person may have either a restless sleep, or they may be not getting into the deep stages of sleep. They could have sleep apnea. So I actually quite like the Dutch Complete for that reason. And plus the Dutch Complete is cheaper to do than the Dutch Plus. The saliva test can also measure overnight, but you've got to wake up and do an overnight sample, and you've got that option here with the cortisol as well. You can do an extra overnight sample. There's more measurements, and with the Dutch Complete over here, you do the waking, and then you should see a cortisol awakening response. So if there's cortisol's this high when you wake up, you want the cortisol awakening response to be much higher 2 hours later. So you're still measuring the CAR or cortisol awakening response with the Dutch Complete, just not in as much detail as the Plus over here. So here you've got the waking sample, 30 minutes later and 60 minutes later. And so that's with cortisone, and 30 minutes with the cortisol, and then 30 minutes. So after 60 minutes, the cortisol response is okay. It's just a little bit slow to respond here. So they've actually got a suppressed morning cortisol response. Then the rest of the day is okay. Like with cortisol, that can change from day to day, but with your total cortisol, that's sort of that wouldn't change as much on a day-to-day basis. So you've got to take into account someone's, the way they're feeling, their lifestyle, and everything going on in their life at the time of testing. Plus, you look at the total cortisol and the free cortisol, free cortisone patterns. And that works for both the complete and the plus. And finally, both tests measure some organic acid markers, and there's been a few new markers added just recently in the last month or so of, this was July 2022. So you measure methylmalonic acid, so that's a marker of B12 deficiencies. The higher you are, the lower your B12. And sometimes people can have good levels of B12 in the blood, but this is measuring B12 at a cellular level, and it's less influenced by supplements and things like that. So this person is deficient in B12, while this person is not. It measures xanthronate and chironate, which are B6 markers. It's got a marker for biotin, glutathione detoxification, indicans, which is like dysbiosis, so high levels of indicans would indicate, an overgrowth of the wrong type of bacteria. With the dopamine and norepinephrine, and in dopamine in particular, this is measuring the metabolites of dopamine. So it doesn't necessarily exactly indicate what's going on at brain level. I would always take into account someone's signs and symptoms. And VMA is your your flight fight. You don't want to see that elevated. You want to be in that state of fly or fight when you first wake up in the morning, like this sample here. And quinolinate is a neuroinflammation marker. And so high levels of that can be associated with anxiety, depression, brain fog, those types of symptoms. And you don't want that to happen. That could be caused by things like the dysbiosis. Melatonin, this is, once again, this is not 100% accurate because it's measuring the metabolites of melatonin. If someone gets up and goes to the bathroom in the middle of the night, they may have missed their melatonin peak like this. It's hard to imagine that someone could be this low in melatonin. But you would look at things like B6 deficiency, vitamin D, magnesium. They're all things that help the body make melatonin. And then the very last marker is an oxidative stress marker, and lower the better. So you want to be, below that sort of 3 range ideally. So that's the organic acid markers of the Dutch test. So as you see, both tests are virtually identical, except for the way the Dutch Plus measures the free cortisol levels compared to the Dutch Complete. So for most people, the Dutch Complete is cheaper and it's probably enough information. But if you want that more precise cortisol awakening response, go for the Dutch Plus. I hope that helps. So in addition to all the facts and figures and the results, you get a report which is 7 or 8 pages long, just explaining the results. And there's also videos on the Dutch website going through the results as well. But it'll just highlight any things that are in range or out of range, just explain what like phase 1, phase 2 detoxification means, methylation, looks at the androgens, and just gives you an overall idea of what's going on. I always recommend working with a practitioner. If you work, you can order the Dutch test through me and I can help you explain the results. Or if you've already done a test, I can review your results for you. Or if you've already got a practitioner who's well versed in the Dutch test results, get them to explain what the results and how it relates to you. Because these recommendations at the end or the information about your results, they're fairly general in nature and educational rather than this is what's going on and this is what you need to do. No one can give a recommendation on a test result without first talking to the person and taking into account their signs and symptoms and what's going on with them, and even reviewing other test results. So things like, with the B12, you might want to look at, B12 in a blood test to see what's going on in comparison. I'd always take the methylmalonic acid as the gold standard though. Same with B6, that can be checked in a blood test. With indicans, you can do a GI map test and look at gut health. So there's a lot of things you can take into account along with the Dutch hormone test. So I hope that helps. The Dutch test, For men, that can be done at any time. For women, the best time is 5 to 7 days after ovulation, which is around days 19 to 22 of your cycle. If you need help knowing when to do the test, you can always reach out. And the test kits are sent directly to you, and you just do them at home and then ship them back to the lab.